super excited about our program today. This is actually our first hybrid event, first hybrid / live in almost 2 years. Huge thank you to John Mackey for getting us this space, and you, Mark. It's awesome. We hope more of you, we've got a couple empty spots, so we hope more of you that are on Zoom will come join us in person next time. A couple of things before we get started. We have people live and on Zoom. So those of you on Zoom, if you can keep your microphones muted to avoid distractions, that'd be great. Debbie is actually, I should introduce myself. I'm Stacy Hall, CFO, Regional Director for the CFO Leadership Council for the California chapters. Debbie Dunn, Marketing Director, is on the Zoom, and she's managing the chat. So if you guys put questions in there, we'll definitely keep track of those and interrupt the discussion if we have time. We obviously have a lot to cover today. For those of you that are on Zoom, to get CPE, there'll be 4 polling questions launched. You need to answer at least 3 of the 4 polling questions. Those of you here in the room, I have a CPE sheet in the back of the room, so if you need CPE, please make sure you sign it before you go. And we'll launch those questions on the background, the CPE questions, but we may discuss them a little bit today. See what kind of answers we get. One thing I want to do real quick before we get started is a big thank you to all our sponsors and to our steering committee members. I can't thank them enough for all they have done these past couple of years, sticking with us during COVID and our move from live to in-person and back and forth. So we've had a lot of patience. I think, Debbie, if you want to move the screen to the sponsors, she can't, but I'll a couple shout out. Oracle NetSuite is one of our national sponsors. Claudia is here with NetSuite. She actually brought us one of our speakers today. Annie also happens to be a member, so really awesome. I appreciate that partnership. Effectus Group for all your technical accounting. Matt Savetich and Mike Montgomery are our sponsors. They are amazing and so well connected. If you don't know them, please get to know them. KPMG, they are also a big sponsor in California. Jules Walker is our steering committee member. I think he also knows just about everybody, and I think that's what I can say about all our sponsors. We really see them as partners and thought leaders. They are so well connected and can help you not only in their business area, but they have connections in so many different ways. Nucleus, Rohit Trakhanda was supposed to be here today, but he got called away at the last minute. But they do day-to-day accounting, HR, payroll, compliance, and legal services in over 50 countries. So definitely reach out to Rohit if you need something in that area. Heffernan Group, they're our insurance partner. Janice Berthold, Joseph Talmadge, they half the time they invite, I think, half of our audience. They are also just such a great partner, so much good information during this time. Topalti, I can't say enough good things about Topalti. They are such a great partner. Alex Cedro is our steering committee representative. He's actually moderating today. So, but they can help you with all your global payables automation. They have just a great company and so many good things to offer. So check them out when you can. Newmark, I mentioned John Mackey. He's our steering committee member and one of our partners for all our real estate needs. They have so much of a wealth of information. They did a program for us last year, provided so much good stuff. We probably should look at doing something like that again. And then last but not least, Pacific Western Bank for all your financial needs. Lillian Lee is our steering committee member, along with Daryl Sorensen and David Schleger. They did our program last month, and I don't know if you guys were there for that, but it was great on BC. So they are such a great resource. So I just want to say thank you to all our steering committees members. Thank you to our sponsors. We couldn't do this without you guys. So
hey, Stacy, can I interrupt really quick?
Sure.
We've got Daryl online from Pacific Western. We've got Janice online from Heffernan, and we've got Rohit online from Nucleus. So some of our sponsors are here also online.
Awesome. Thank you. So now I'd like to turn it over to Alex Cedro, VP of Finance for Topalti. He worked tirelessly to help bring in some of these speakers, put the panel outline together, and in between, he managed to go to Boston last week and do a panel at our national conference. So I'm not sure when he's getting his VP of Finance job done, but we so appreciate all that you've done. So with that, Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you to get started.
Great, thanks, Stacy. Really excited to be here. Stacy mentioned, I'm the VP of Finance at Tumulty. Tumulty helps automate payables, global payments, and procurement activities for companies. Essentially help reduce the amount of time that finance teams take to close, essentially shortening the lead time of the biggest cog in the close process, which is accounts payable. At Tumulty, I oversee the non-accounting side of the finance org, so starting from FP&A to sales commissions, deal desk, business intelligence team, as well as procurement. About this session, real quick, before I turn it over to get an introduction from panelists. The session's about how finance can win the tech race. So as CFOs and their teams are looking to do more with less, as they're moving more towards more automation or digital transformation, there's a whole host of questions and issues that they're facing from how do they prioritize the different technologies, what's the implementation strategies, how do they look at the various landscapes of the different vendors. And so there's a lot of sort of questions and experiences that would be helpful. And that's what we're looking to get from the panel, see how they approach things in their career, maybe in their current roles, how they sort of dealt with some of these things and be able to help share those insights with us today. So let me turn it over to the panelists to give a brief bio of themselves, but also be good to hear just from a perspective for the audience that say at their companies, the size of their company and maybe the growth stage is that to provide context as we have the views from there that can help inform some of the audience.
You start. My name is Charlie Cavers. I'm the CFO of Carta. Carta is a company providing a solution to manage equity for companies, funds, basically the whole private markets ecosystem. I think everything equity is what we do, from issuing equity to managing the liquidity of it. We're today mostly focused on the US, where we haven't really expanded beyond the US. We've got 1,700 employees today, so pretty later stage, I would say, in terms of startups. I joined the company when we're around 150, so I've seen the change from 150 to 1,700. So a lot of data systems and the scale that comes with it. Happy to be here.
I'm Razak Jallo. I'm the CFO of Flowcast. We do accounting workflow automation software, which is primarily around the close, but other products adjacent to the close as well. Been there about 6 months now, and we are primarily in the US. We do have a EMEA office that's up and growing. And our most recent public data that we released was actually around revenue. So we just crossed 50 million ARR in Q4, growing at 96% year over year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Wayne. I'm the CFO at MindGuard, and we are a provider that provides unified visibility into data stacks for managed service providers. And we have about 1,800 managed service providers that we do business with, and then they have about 55,000 customers that they do business with. So our technology touches about 55,000 end customers. We are on the earlier stage of all of these. We started doing business in 2018, and we are about 130 employees. Very excited to be here, and it's going to be fun to talk to these guys at the different stages of what our technology digital transformation looks like.
Great. Thanks everyone, the panelists for joining today. Really excited to dive in. Let's start with the first question. Here, where does automation, digital transformation, in terms of priority, where does it fall on your list? And you can speak to sort of the last project or purchase from a system standpoint that you've at your company start with.
Oh, okay. Great. So I think digital transformation is really going to win the day for finance organizations. And my biggest kind of transition has been in implementing systems so that the whole transition goes through and that there's no manual process throughout anything. And so really automating that. And the biggest technology that I feel like has helped us is my implementation of NetSuite and being able to have that connect into our Expensify, into the different technologies, and so that it's all automated.
I love this question because I think a lot of us kind of sell into the office of the CFO. And if you look at the office of the CFO, it's changed a lot over the last few years. The number of public companies with COOs is going down, and the number of direct reports to the CFO is going up as they're starting to absorb some of that responsibility. It's going elsewhere too. And so when you think about that, the CFO role is becoming more and more operational, and tech is a big part of that. For myself, I don't have a priority around tech. I have 3 business outcome top priorities, and tech touches them all. So when I think of number 1 is setting up the company, the right people, processes, and systems for scale to continue the current growth rate. That's not purely tech, but it's going to be driven a lot by tech. It's number 2 is really driving a more data-driven culture and measuring success of all outcomes. Right, that's data ubiquity. That's on your BI platform. That's a big technology piece of that. And the third one's a little specific, being the best Flowcast user, Flowcast, so it's a little self-serving, but you can see how our biz ops and tech touches all those. And recently we've rolled out 4 major things in the last 6 months, whether that's a new customer success system, whether that was a new procurement system, new pricing on Salesforce, and our BI platform on Snowflake.
Very similar to Razak. The 2 big priorities for my team are supporting growth and scale. And what that means, what is the infrastructure that helps our sales team and all the customer facing teams having an easier job, and then from broadly across the company, starting with finance, how do we scale? Grown quite a bit over the last few years, and the company effectively changes every 6 months. So how do we kind of stay ahead of that and make sure we get systems that can support that? One of the recent, we've gone through a lot of system implementation. The 2 most recent ones is we moved to Workday in terms of consolidating HRIS and payroll, which is a really big project for us. We only did before. And we implemented Zora in one part of our business to start to test how different billing systems and subscription management systems would work. We have already different product lines, so we're also spending a little bit of time trying different systems. Those are 2 really big ones we did recently. But we have constant changes to it.
It's helpful, yeah.
Hey, Alex, I was going to jump into, we did do the first poll on the financial software tools, and it does look like 31% of the audience is currently implementing something, and less than 12 months ago, 31%, and 38% were greater than 12 months ago. So it's kind of interesting to get an engage.
Yeah, and again, I think that's why this conversation is pretty top of mind. It's obviously with all the tools out there and how the benefits of what the systems provide, but also in terms of trying to achieve what the company's goals are. Finance needs to enable that, and automation definitely helps get us there. It's more related to some of the things that were mentioned here. It's a topic that sort of came up before we started the panel. Sort of prioritizing. So obviously, very keen on the CFO office and what we need to be able to get our teams to be able to do. But then how do we look at it versus the other investments that the other areas of the company? Obviously, automation is not just a finance objective. It's something that sales, marketing, engineering, product operations need to do. Great to hear that's calling whoever wants to chime in here. How do you look at that? Obviously, you guys have a bias. You want to get your own team, your own organization ramped up and running as fast as possible. But how do you balance that versus the needs of your executives?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. We're at a scale now where we're doing this centrally. Just broke down at some point because we're trying to move so fast. And at some point, it's just the argument of like, well, I'm the sales leader. This is important for me. You're the finance leader. It's important for you. How do we decide what's important? So we started to create separate teams. So we have like a team supporting everything that's customer related. So think customer service, support, implementation, and revenue. A team that supports all people, legal, finance. So really by areas of the business, and that's made those discussions a lot more effective. At least within G&A, we can decide what's more or less important. within revenue, within R&D, and so we start to break it down. In terms of finance specifically, how we prioritize is really three angles to it. One is accuracy, second is automation, and the last one is insights. And accuracy meaning, think of it from a risk standpoint, like where do we avoid having mistakes and issues? So really ensuring that we have, you know, really good automation and where we remove as much manual process as possible to reduce risk. The scalability we talked about is just making sure that, you know, as our business continue to grow fast, that we not have to just keep adding people to support that. And then the insights, obviously important as well to make sure we get the data we need to make decisions fast.
We're a little earlier stage than Carta, so we have a centralized biz ops team and an office of the PMO that actually reports to myself. It's been really helpful in helping us figure out which projects we can do and which ones to prioritize. I think the question is specifically around prioritization. If everything's good on the project, it is really hard to make some of those calls. It takes a lot of collaboration and trust between the different executive team. But there are tricks we use to kind of whittle that list down. So an example might be, do you actually have the time to really commit to helping this project be successful? You know, if it's sales, we need 4 of your best people to spend 6 weeks with this project for it to be successful. Can you do that? Okay, you also want project number 2. Do you have 4 more people in 6 weeks to do that? And at what point is it going to impact your quarter? And then it kind of starts spreading the projects out so it's more manageable throughout the year. If there are efficiency projects like on the finance and HR side that are going to impact a tool everybody in the company uses, it really is about how much benefit are we getting out of it versus how much cost is it for I'm talking about people's pain point of using a different tool to actually roll that out. How would you feel if we're big on NPS? How would you feel if the NPS of this process went down when we polled users before and after? Is that an acceptable decline? So it's not always we do ROIs on every project to help prioritize, but normally it's just to make sure the project's worthwhile. We're not choosing one project over the other because it's got a 145% versus 147% ROI. That's normally not the determinant.
You know, to echo what both of these guys have said, you know, insights and automation and accuracy is really important. In terms of, you know, we're even smaller than you guys at Flowcast and smaller than Carta, but I think one of the things that we have done effectively is really this idea of cross-functional, right? And so it's no longer just a finance issue. We are really trying to bubble this up of, you know, we're executing as a team. And so that's one of our core values at Lineguard. And so just making sure that, you know, whatever it is that we're doing, we have cross-functional representation from the executive team as well as from, you know, the various different functions. And when you're smaller, you can do that, but I think it's a great thing to establish early on, and so that as you grow, you can continue to carry that through as the business changes every 6 months.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, and as you, and to your point, because I think you were used to the small, like the earlier stage in terms of size, how do you, your finance teams, how do you identify those areas that are most ripe to automate?
I think really it's the pain, right? It's if you know, if you're doing something manually and repetitively over and over and over again, or there's an opportunity for us to, you know, so I would say billing is one, right? And an area where, you know, there's risk for things to be done incorrectly, or it impacts your customer, and they're getting incorrect billing, and then that hurts your NPS score. You know, those are the, you know, areas where I've identified. So we're actually in the process of rolling out Salesforce billing in our organization, and so we've used another very MSP-centric billing system called ConnectWise and Connect Booster historically. But we are now moving to Salesforce billing, but for that very reason, so that we can have a better control over and have more accurate, you know, sort of the whole CPQ process for how our customers are engaging with us from the sales process all the way through to
Anything you guys want to add? comments earlier.
And one thing that's pushed us to prioritize certain things is clearly the pain 100%, but also the risk. And so we move a fair amount of money for our customers around exercising options and those types of things. And it used to be manual reconciliation between bank and our system, usually spreadsheets. That is not scalable. It's way too much risk for me. So we did, that's a few years ago now, but we completely revamped that integration, moved to perfect receivables at Wells Fargo, so we can literally have a virtual account for every transaction, and kind of integrated that with our system. That took actual engineering work.
Yeah.
But now what my team does is only review exceptions. And so instead of reviewing everything all the time and potentially missing things, which of course happen, now it's just like it surfaces maybe one exception a day, two exceptions a day, and that's what they're spending their time on. But those types of things have been really big for us in the early days to make sure we didn't scale on something that would just fundamental.
I think they both covered that really well. I think the one thing I'd add to it is it's much easier to identify these if you have the right team and talent who has an eye for where technology can help. It's very hard for myself to understand every single pain point of every person in the org or the company. But if you have a team that's familiar with it, they can help surface those solutions a lot quicker and make better decisions.
Yeah, that's an important point here. It's a little bit adjacent, but it's tied to it is the people impact of sort of this move to more technology, more automation. Now, how receptive have your teams been? And then also be curious, because I think this came up in another conversation I had about it, for those people that are used to the manual process or legacy tool that they've been using, how do you get people to sort of make that transition or sort of ease it or sort of push them forward?
I'll start on this one. I actually have the exact opposite problem
Uh-huh.
where everyone wants technology and we are, sort of our SaaS budget is just blown up in terms of everyone is buying and VCs are investing in all these great technologies and everyone has to have the latest and greatest. So the challenge as a CFO is to be disciplined about, how do you spend in the technologies? But then the other problem is what is your central source of truth? And so that has been a challenge. And then also to be able to get insights out of all of these systems has been a very interesting challenge for us. So it hasn't been I'm trying to pull people along because they want to do something manually. I'm going to go in, I'm going to go put a commission software program in place. I'm going to go put a payables process in place. I'm going to go put, it's so many different systems and they're so disparate. So that's really where I've seen the struggle line to make sure that, no, this is the single source of truth for this. And we've got customer data in a bunch of different places, right? So it's really challenging.
We're similar culturally, very, very much a group that wants to engage and use tech to solve problems. I think where we pump the brakes on some of those things is making sure it's solving a significant enough problem. It's not just a new tool to maintain, but also making sure that the time to value is very quick. I find most of the time when projects go wrong, it's because it had a very long timeline for implementation and the end user didn't have enough time to devote over those 12 months. And so BizOps had to run off on their own and they kept running. And as Charlie said, the business changed every 6 months. So an 8 or 12 month timeline is pretty long. When people are resistant to change, I actually find it's more because we waited too long to solve the pain point. And so now they're working 60, 80 hours a week, just cranking things. And you ask them about doing that plus working on a new tool. And it's just too much. Like I don't want to think that it's too hard. So solving the pain points before they're really big pain points is helpful.
Yeah, completely agree. One thing I'd add is I have the same problem, like more technology asks than having to force people. So we put a lot more rigor into that. But in terms of really, the expectation on our team is that is how you plan your work. Like just you're expected to come with how do I make this better? How do I scale it? And by definition, you can't just do it with people because I also constrain what my team can hire. So it's almost like by setting the right objectives and constraints, the technology has to be part of the discussion. So that's worked really well. I'm lucky enough to have managers running all the teams that report to me, very much that in mind.
Question?
I just wanted to follow up on that topic. You all had similar responses when you said, hey, my folks really want all this technology. And it goes back a little bit to your point, Razak, is that what I find is that they want the technology, but then they miss the step that they have to be part of the team or even just implementing a new GL system that they have to carve out the time and the work. So I didn't know if that was a balance as well, because you still need to create a new chart of accounts or whatever it is that involves them. So I understand the desire, but is there a match of the fact that they have to devote the time?
I mean, and that's kind of my point around that's expected in the role. So basically, structure the work, and that's more a direction to the VPs on my team. Like, structure your team, structure the workload, so much so that you have the time to go make these implementations successful. Because 100%, you need involvement, and it'd be super thoughtful. Implementation timelines. I've got a lot of thoughts about that. But just making it part of how you operate the team is the only way we get there. And not to say it's easy. Like, I'm still in a situation where people are like, I'm already busy 7 days a week. Like, what else do you want me to do? But that's we constantly challenge ourselves to make sure it's just part of the work.
Completely
You guys can
agree.
Talk just a little bit louder. People online are having a hard time.
Sure,
That would
sure.
be Great, thank you.
Completely agree. I think the thing I'd add to that is it really helps to use implementation partners and a lot of things to take some of that bandwidth off the team and not force them to try and, if they haven't done a lot of systems implementations before, it can be a real value add without breaking things. I think that's something I try not to skimp on, is how much we budget for the actual implementation to make sure it hits the ground runs well.
And then everyone, I forgot to mention up front, if people have questions from the audience or obviously on Zoom, feel free to raise them. Question, and you brought this up, just sort of with the sort of the plethora of tools out there, the number of new companies trying to sort of sell into the CFO office. As you putting things together, you look at your organization, how do you come up with sort of like that technology strategy architecture? Okay, this is the pain point, but we want to make sure we start with the ERP, and then we're going to branch off to something else, whether it be billing or AP. Like, how do you think through that? Again, prioritization question, but making sure things make sense and you're putting it in the right space, because you can only do one implementation or one tool sort of at a time. But you want to make sure, obviously, from a technology standpoint, they're talking together, that they're integrated well, but you just don't end up with 25 tools and no one knows what's going on and they're not talking to each other.
Right, I think, I think the most important thing obviously is getting the GL package right. And getting that structured in a way that is, that you can get reporting out of it, right? And then integrating those activities that are voluminous, right? So that you're not creating, like we have, like I said, we have 1,800 partners that we sell to. So, sending out 1,800 bills a month and growing quite a bit is, like that's something that's not repeatable, right? That's manually, you can't just, otherwise you're just gonna have so many billion people who are invoicing. So, for us to, in our business, it's really just doing things that are, what is the volume, and then making sure that those are done well and integrating and getting visibility into the downstream impact. So again, on billing, making sure that we've got that visibility into our accounting package so that then we can do, obviously what is now with the macroeconomic environment is the area we're moving into now, which is cash is really going to be king again, and being able to collect, cash from your customers and have, a low DSO. So those are the things that we are, that making sure that those things are done well and done right, and then you can branch off from that. But if you can't really do the nuts and bolts well and get the insights and get the data out, and as your investors are asking you questions, and as your sales leaders are asking questions, and your CEO is asking questions, and your board is asking questions, like getting all of just sort of that base data in the system, then you can sort of say, okay, here's what I want to measure, here's what I want to report on, And then the secondary activity is helpful.
Yeah, we think of it similarly in terms of, we think of really the what, the why, and the how. So we have systems that are the what. These are your kind of, you go there and you get the number that you need, whether that's a Salesforce or whether that's your ERP, et cetera. And then I think a lot of companies invest in the why. So for me, that's BI. It's looking across all the different systems. Why did this number move? How did it move over time? And that's important for visibility for everybody. And where I think we try to focus equal investment on is really the how of things get done. And so that's where you have things that are, okay, well, I have my revenue number in NetSuite. NetSuite's awesome for that. And I have Flowcast where I can figure out how was that reconciliation done? How was it come up with? Who prepared it? Who reviewed it? When can I actually pull that number out? Is it actually good? And I can use it. It's not going to change. And so we invest across those three. And we try to make sure that we don't try and make tools that aren't meant to do something do the other two, right? So we try not to like get a whole bunch of other data into Flowcast to try and make it a BI tool. And we try not to do things to Salesforce and NetSuite to make them more like a Flowcast or something. And so that's been really helpful for us in figuring out what we do next. And we have a good, healthy debate on when should systems integrate with each other, Salesforce, NetSuite, et cetera, Carta, all those, and when we don't really do that and it should go through our BI platform, et cetera. So I think that's always a healthy debate on, should I make two systems talk directly or should they talk through a bigger platform?
Great. We've got that exact debate.
Yeah, we have, as we.
We're sending a lot of, our data team has a perspective, I do, but it's actually really healthy to your point, like not defaulting to everything has to be fully integrated. And initially use some form of warehouse to get the information you need, but really interesting that you've gone through this. Very, very similar. I think for us, we're a multi-product company at this point, so like a lot of what we spend our time these days to figure out is like with all these new things we're doing, like we'll start manually and then quickly identifying where things are scaling so that we need to focus on that aspect to support that scalability. And that's what for us at this point, because a lot of the foundational systems are in place. Salesforce has been in place for years. Continue to evolve it. NetSuite, same thing as we do more. I think one thing we did well there is keep it really simple. Like 5 years ago when we put it in, and now just like slowly continue to evolve with the business. So all these things for us, those are not big issues, and we have enough resource to be able to implement, to iterate on it. But it's more these newer, well, we're going to go sell in Singapore. What does that mean? Right? Like, okay, like that's where we spend most of our time in terms of priorities to really support these new growth initiatives for the business. And so that tends to take the forefront because everything else is more iteration at this point for us. That's the scale. Once you start multi-geography, multi-products, like the complexity is what tends to drive our focus areas.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that, Charlie? Is how often, or you mentioned this concept of keeping something manual until you've got it figured out. How long do you guys do that, right? How long do you say, okay, until we've got, as opposed to like, we've got a new idea, we've got a new product, we're going to go and configure our Salesforce or our coding system or whatever to do that. How long do you guys usually iterate on that?
I wish there was a clear rule to it. It made my life a lot easier.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is just like, when is the pain so strong that we absolutely have to do something? But it's also, at this point, we've done it multiple times. So generally, it'll be a few months. It's never that long because all it is like, do we have enough signal? It's that balance between like, well, we don't even know if that product is going to work.
Right.
Like we want to test it, we want to support the team who's doing this, but half the time it's not going to work. Or at least not in that form, and therefore we might build differently, we might price differently. And so we're just waiting to get enough information that like, okay, now this is actually scaling, people are buying this, and now we're going back and make sure we put process in place.
Got it.
What we're doing better now is like from the get-go saying, okay, we will give this 1, 2, 3, 4 months to make a decision. In the past, it was like, oh, this is working. Did anybody notice? Oh, no, we got to go fix it. Like we got a little more, like the folks who do it for me, they've gone through this, they've felt the pain, so they're way better at actually having a plan up front. Okay, so it'll vary a little bit.
As opposed to putting it in right at the beginning and saying, oh, we've coded it in and we've configured it, and then you're like, well, wait, we need to modify it
Yeah.
because
And then the
the-
CRO and the chief
CRO
of product just come and yell and say, yeah, so trying to avoid
Exactly.
that, yes.
Exactly.
Charlie, you made a earlier comment. It sounded like you had a lot of battle scars from some implementations of your day. So I want to tap into that a little bit. Also, obviously, I want to hear from Annie and Razak, but can you describe maybe one implementation that you had that you would have done differently? And sort of lessons learned from that.
Yeah, so first I agree with Razak, getting external help for this is actually really helpful. It's really tough to find teams that just have a ton of system experience, and so similarly, we're never cheap on just making sure we get the right resources. But that said, the folks externally are very incentivized to make the scope of the project really big. So that's the learning, is how do you keep a lot of discipline and like, no, what I really need is this. Right now, and that's my point around, like, and we learned this with NetSuite. There actually we had really helpful consultants who were like, you're making this way too complicated. Start here, and then we can just continue to build on it, but build is just simple foundation versus trying to solve everything right now, trying to predict what the business is going to be like in 5 years.
Yeah.
And so one of the recent ones where I think we could have done a better job was our implementation of Zora, where we implemented both billing and subscription management at the same time. I think we made it way too complex, trying to solve too many things at the same time. I think we'd have a better time just saying, let's do this module first, get that out the door, make it work, then go to the next one. And just our experience is being every time we go into a complex project, just the scope creeps. And that's why it's really like bringing discipline to like, are we really solving the core problem? And then, yeah, because the moment it's something multifunctional, everybody will have a version of what they want. So really keeping that an ongoing engagement of like, no, what's really the core thing we're trying to solve? For us, that's been the learning. And not to say we do it perfectly, far from it. We still have scope that's just like balloons, and generally the cost ends up being a lot more. But yeah, that's one of the big learnings for us.
That's a good one.
So this one was an interesting one that goes back to that external help piece. It's not just external help, but also internal talent. I joined a company that was earlier stage or pretty small. They were just starting out the rollout of Anaplan, which is a fantastic tool and product. But however, the decision was made for not to really have any dev or tech resources on it, for the FP&A team to just learn it and build the models and do everything themselves. And as you can imagine, that they're not developers. That didn't go very well. And I think the interesting thing for that I took out of it is at a certain point, all of a sudden it just clicked for me that, sure, we could start over and maybe have this implementation go well. But at that point, there was so much burnout and so much negativity around the product. It was never going to be embraced well. And so at that point, we just stopped it. We ate the contract on it. But I was really happy I made that decision because I realized the perception of the project and the technology is really important to adoption and team morale. And I think whatever decisions we had made up to that point had led us to a point where that wasn't going to work out. And I've used Anaplan before; it's a great product, but it was us on how we chose to approach that implementation.
Anything to share?
I think, one of the things I've done in the past is bought an FP&A tool in addition to the same time buying sort of an ERP tool. And so I would get the ERP system in place and then the FP&A tool, again, working in smaller size companies, but kind of my eyes are bigger than my stomach. So I was, trying to get everything done and then, didn't actually get the, sort of the FP&A part completely finalized before the company got sold. So I've had that happen twice so far. So I think that's the, just really, and I like what you said, Charlie, which is really like, let's, narrow the scope of what we're trying to do, because that's what we find too, is there's just scope creep, and, our BizOps team is running so fast on getting one thing, and they don't get it complete, right? They don't get it completely finalized or in a really, it's kind of good enough, but there's still problems, or there's still errors, or there's still issues, or they're still being worked around. And so, kind of reducing the scope creep reducing the activity and getting the foundational level in place very securely and very strong is really something that, you know, I'm learning along the way as well, that, you know, to be able to help with these transitions.
It's interesting you said that. Our biz ops team has a concept of what we call intensive care. So right after it launches, like it's almost all hands on deck to make sure that all the post-launch things are fixed really quickly. It's not perfect, but I
That's a
think that
great idea.
it does help.
That's a great idea. Intensive care, I love it. That is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, the other consideration, what I've gone through in the past is if the implementation, external consultants were helpful, but then if you rely on them too much, if there's not as much internal participation, then at the end, when it's go live, and the consultants leave, if there's an issue, people don't know what to do, or they have to keep coming back to the consultants or to the vendor, and obviously. So it's, yeah, there's no silver bullet, but in terms of being able to factor that in, as you sort of look at implementation, some things to sort of look out for. As one of the things that we've seen, and obviously it's some of us here sell into the CFO office, sort of like the number of tools and vendors out there. How do you guys sort of stay smart about the new technologies, and when you identify an area that you want to prioritize and want to make that transformation? How do you learn about the technologies or stay smart about them? And then how do you go about keeping speed with all the innovations that are out there?
I can answer that. One of the things I do is, you know, I get solicited to a lot, but I actually take the calls, right? So that I can, you know, or I'll get on the phone with these folks and just, you know, for half an hour and talk to them and learn from them on what it is they're offering. And I think that, you know, we're all super busy, but I think it really helps. And or I encourage my team to do the same thing, which is like, hey, you know, you should go listen to this, you know, that does some interesting stuff.
Actually very similar. I take a lot of those calls, especially just letting, especially a lot of our investors and board members, letting them know, hey, as you invest in new companies that you think solve unique pain points in the office of the CFO, happy to talk to them and hear their pitch and learn about what they're solving. And also listen to a lot of CFO forums and what people are finding great, whether that's a new FP&A tool or something else. I think that's always interesting when it's a company I haven't heard of, or one that I maybe didn't like 5 years ago, and now people are finding a lot of value, and sometimes I'll revisit things.
It's great. Change your mind. Huh?
It's very similar. I talk to a lot of other finance professionals, and so just getting there, it's also like, what is your tech stack? What are you using? Is always helpful. Just kind of compare notes, and then I do exactly what Zach described. All our investors are doing the same thing. Like the office of the CFO is actually apparently a theme for many of them right now, because I'm getting pinged a lot. I'm like, do you mind meeting with this company and tell us what you think? Would you buy it? How much would you pay for it? And all these things. And so I got exposed. Actually, through that process, we bought two new systems that were like, wait, we didn't know about this. One procurement system and our FP&A system is something we discovered that way. So yeah, that's actually been super helpful, because by definition, they're going to look at kind of what's the next stage, what could compete with an plan, what would adaptive, and these types of things. And that's been a really effective way to get in front of those new systems that we're going to know about.
That's a good point, Charlie. 'Cause how do you evaluate sort of those types of next gen tools in terms of the risk, because this product's only been out for 12 to whatever it is, 18, 24 months, and potentially could be in beta. You know, how do you stack that versus the more established player that has more resources to develop?
We're not a good example. We're very comfortable going with like the upstarts, because we were the upstart at some point. And frankly, one thing I didn't appreciate until it happened to us is when you're one of the early larger customers of one of these companies, they build stuff for you.
Mm-hmm.
The company we just are implemented on our planning system. We literally are on the phone with them every week, and they're like, it's coming next week.
Yep.
And they literally put a full product team behind it. I can't get that with Workday with an Anaplan. So that has tremendous value. that assumes that what we're doing, they think is relevant to their broader customer set. Sounds like we're saying similar things to other customers, and so that's being a real value. Brex, we were on one of their first larger customers. They did a lot of things for us to integrate with NetSuite. They didn't have the NetSuite integration. We're like, guys, we're leaving if this doesn't happen. It happened within, I think, within 2 quarters. That is something I just, before being in this position, I didn't appreciate the value of that. It's still risky. I'm not saying like, still have a product that doesn't scale the way you hope it would, but we're comfortable making those choices because right now it's mostly the benefit we got of having something built that we really think solves our problems has been bigger than all the risk we've taken so far.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I'd add to it that I'm very much in, can someone pull up a demo and show me how the product works in the first phone call? If a company is going to make me wade through like 2 hours of PowerPoint slides before they actually show me what the product does and how it works, I kind of know the product probably isn't right for us. So that's one way I weed out like, hey, are they really, really too early, or are they just early and can at least meet the minimum need and grow with us? But
Yeah, and we're like Charlie and Carta, where we'll, take advantage of new and coming technology. And, I think it's really the time to value, how quickly you can see that value, how heavy of a lift it is. And then I think also alignment on, kind of what it is you're doing manually right now that needs to get automated. And is there alignment in kind of just the thinking around and the approach, and does it have most of what it is?
So pivoting a little bit, trailing on some of your comments there, Annie, how do you measure success of or tool once it goes live? What do you have in place to say, is this impactful? Did this meet our objective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily for me, or it hasn't been a measurable, like, amount of hours that we're spending on something is lower, or that there's some return or whatever. I think that's just a feeling, or an understanding. The team, it's coming along. It's just kind of, there's not a lot of problems. We can get the answers we need as quick as we can. It's repetitive. It's repeatable. I think that's the thing. It's when you go back to a system and you can see like the numbers are the same, right? And you can reconcile, like all of those things are just, you kind of take it for granted that it's like, oh, this just kind of works, right? And so it's just that kind of works is what I would call success. And that my teams are happy with the fact that they can do what we're asking them to do and get the data that we need.
Yeah, I think teams being happy is a critical one. We do put some metrics around it on what would make the teams happy. So for example, in our procurement system that we recently launched, like how many of them are going through the proper process versus outside the process, how many of them are taking manual rework by someone instead of just working purely out of the system, and maybe like 5 or 6 metrics on that we can look at and say, is this doing what we thought it was going to do? And we use that kind of a proxy for, is the team happy with it, but they'll also be vocal if it's happy or not happy. So we try to do those. It's not quite it's always hard to track hours on things. We don't ask people to log their time, so it's really hard to really track the hours saved.
Yeah, similar. I'd love to be able to track hours, but yeah, not realistic. But it's looking for outcomes like, days it takes for us to close the month and this type of thing. But we've seen clear shift, and it's a combination of tools, but just like overall metrics are like cost per invoice and cost per, different scale metrics to understand it. Like just the full cost of the team supporting that across systems and people, is that going down over time? And so that generally gets us in the right direction. Happiness of the team, 100%. You don't hear it within 2 seconds if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And then from a risk standpoint, how many errors, exceptions, these types of things happen, right? Because the whole point of automation and scalability is to just reduce that risk. And at least in the areas where we are more scalable, more predictable, that should go down meaningfully. So what's the percentage of errors that happen in a specific process? process, which is something new or by definition, we'll have more things that you have to work through. So that's also a component for us that we make sure we track. It's just, when we've automated, that we reduced.
Yeah, this movement to more systems and more tools is obviously the benefit of the teams that we have. Speak to some of the things you've directly seen related to retention and attraction of talent. Start with anyone that wants to jump in.
Sure, I think I like to hire really, really smart people and I like to retain them. I think most people would agree with that sentiment. But to actually retain the smart people, if you're asking to kind of turn the crank on a manual process for 80% of their work hours, there's no amount of money that's going to be able to retain them doing that. So systems are a key theme, and this speaks to more overall FlowCast belief that finance and accounting specifically are going to continue to get more operational, and we need to free up that time so people can make more operational impact on the business. And so technology is a huge piece to attracting and retaining the top talent and keeping them happy. And without it, I don't think I could have a player team from top to bottom with asking them to do work that is not their favorite thing to do.
I don't have anything to add. You said it so well. Thank you.
I agree. I think Zach's point on being able to focus on operational challenges is, I think that's a real plus. Not just going through the repeating the same process every month, every quarter, just being able to just like, great, the system tells me if there's something I need to pay attention to, and of course, go take care of that. But then I can spend more time supporting the business. How can I help them support, solve issues for them? And that's motivating to anybody who wants to grow a business.
Yeah.
I don't have a single finance person who doesn't want to understand more about what the business is doing, what the strategy is, get more context, and everything we talked about should enable them to have more of those discussions and grow their careers from that perspective. So,
Yeah, and I think that's pretty critical. Some of you had mentioned it. It's the benefits of automation is one. We want our teams to be doing more value add, more sort of strategic things. Obviously for our benefit, but also for theirs, because they came into their roles wanting to be challenged, wanting to learn and grow. But if they're doing something in a repetitive nature, they're gonna feel sort of burnt out or stalled at the sort of ceiling. So we want to enable them and provide them with the tools within them to do the jobs that we require them. But also that's the retention side. But I know on the attraction side, as I've been sort of conducting interviews with mid-level or junior staff, a lot of them are asking, well, what's in your tech stack? What are you using? What's your planning tool? What's your billing tool? What's your equity? What's your account management tool? And so the environment out there, people are becoming smart. They want to make sure they're coming into an environment where they'll have the necessary things for them to be able to succeed. So I think it's a pretty critical area that we need to emphasize on. As we're sort of winding down with our time here, sort of like one of the last questions I want to ask, given what's sort of going on in the world today. Obviously, there's sort of a little tumultuous time in the macro environment. We're seeing how has that changed your view in terms of investments, whether it be in the finance or within your company, in terms of digital transformation? Have you guys sort of changed or reprioritized, maybe planned earlier in the year, or we had budgeted for the year?
certainly always reevaluate kind of the speed at which we deploy capital, but the priorities have changed. Actually, I'd welcome things slowing down a little bit, because then we can actually focus on scaling and come out of it even stronger. So in terms of like, yeah, what we're investing in, no change. The question is just like how fast we do it.
Same thing, no changes there. I think we're always running scenarios both up and down for 2023 and beyond. So we were doing that 6-9 months ago. We'll continue doing that going forward, but no change yet.
Yeah, I think no change in the underlying system, but I think that there is renewed focus on getting the metrics right and making sure that there's data accuracy, and so that we have sort of dashboarding available to us. And it's, I'm driving it from the CFO seat, for the whole organization in all the different areas, just to make sure that we are instrumented properly. So as we are facing these macroeconomic changes and things that are coming at us left and right, that we will be in a position to, to have a finger on the pulse and make sure that we're doing the right things and having visibility, like what you said, we're doing the same thing, reforecasting, every couple of weeks, it seems like, right, to adjust as we go forward.
Great. I know we're coming out of time, and sort of one final question. I just want to wrap up some of the key themes that we've sort of heard today from panelists, just in terms of how CFOs think through their technology landscape, how they prioritize within their own teams, but also across the company. Also, some helpful insights as to implement a lot of different tools and systems to make our teams a lot more efficient and optimized. So it's been really helpful. Last question, parting question. This is something we like to do here at the Leadership Council. We always ask the panelists, if we want to give the audience sort of one sort of piece of advice that they can go back and talk to their teams about, make it pretty beneficial for them. What parting advice would you?
I've come back to what I said about implementation. Keep it simple.
Yep.
Sleep as actionable as I can make it. Yeah. Watch the scope.
I would say set clear goals and measure yourself against them on tech and implementation. So that way it's very different when someone says, I want this software, than if they say, okay, well, what's your goal and what are you actually going to achieve with the software? And you'll find people engage a lot more in the implementation, being much more concise in exactly what they're asking for in scope. And so I would say set goals and measure yourself against them.
I would echo Charlie, which, keep it simple, but also have a real clear understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish, right? And so, what does it look like? What are you trying to drive to? And then, kind of look at things from different angles and think about where something can go off the rails, and make sure that, because you wake up and you're like, how did we get here? Like, this isn't where I expected. So I think kind of having, as the CFO, if we're the ones driving it, be that anchor and have that vision and that strategic focus on where is it that we want to go, because we've got to shepherd and navigate our teams as well as any outside provider, both the technology provider and any consultants who we're working with. So I think we have to be in that role of kind of the orchestrator or the chief strategist, in addition to wearing our CFO hats.
I think we have just I think a couple minutes. I don't know if there is. Are there any questions here live or?
I have some feedback. So one of the questions that you asked was how do people evaluate what technology they want to consider, right? There's so many standalone technologies, and being representative of NetSuite, oftentimes I come across someone saying, I just implemented this billing system, or I just implemented this new commission software. But for my day-to-day, I'm talking to customers just like yourselves. So I get to hear the headaches of, I hate this commission software, we're ripping it out, or this AP automation tool isn't working. And I think what I don't see a lot of NetSuite representatives doing is offering themselves as a resource just to have a conversation. You might not be ready to implement NetSuite right now, but if you have a trusted NetSuite advisor, I love talking about, here's what I'm seeing. Here's where I'm seeing a trend of, this is like a whole new trend of standalone billing that I've seen in the past 12 months, being a bigger focus rather than implementing the whole procurement. So I would advise, beyond looking at mentorship groups or your colleagues, is talking to either the Intact or the NetSuite representative and saying, what are you seeing in the marketplace? Because I get the fun of talking to these customers every day and understanding why is that standalone system not working for them. And what I do is I take that feedback back to my other prospective clients that I support. So I think that's something that a lot of financial folks don't consider is, well, she's just a salesperson. But it's, well, we talk to these guys every single day. So pick our brains and understand if that new tool out there is actually the next best thing, or should they consider something a little bit more?
That's a good point.
Any other questions, thoughts? Not, thank you so much. Thank you, Alex, Charlie, Rosique, Annie. That was great. Such great information. Appreciate you guys. Thank you again to our sponsors and steering committee. You guys are awesome. And hopefully we'll get some more people in person next month. All right.
Thank you. Thanks so much.